Hi, my name is Sunniva, and this is my presentation about Agent Orange for the course The Health Aspects of Waste Management. Agent Orange was one of the most infamous chemical pesticides used during the Vietnam War. Its intended use was as a military tool, but its toxic contamination and the improper way it was disposed led to a huge, devastating health and environmental consequences. Agent Orange is a prime example of how hazardous waste mismanagement can create long-term public health crises, including cancer and birth defects and also contaminated land and water sources. These effects continued decades after its initial use. What is Agent Orange? Agent Orange is a herbicide and defoliant which was used by the American military in Vietnam during the Vietnam War. The Vietnam War was between 1961 and 1971. The goal of the American military while using this Agent Orange was to destroy enemy food supplies and the dense forests, so that the native Vietnam army could not find cover in the forests. It was sprayed over 4.5 million acres of land in Vietnam, Laos, and Cambodia. The main problem with the pesticide Agent Orange was that it was contaminated with dioxin, which is one of the most toxic chemicals known to humans. It is a persistent organic pollutant that accumulates in the environment and also in the human body. This causes severe health and environmental effects. The dioxin contaminations wasn't only in Vietnam, but also in the military storage sites, manufacturing plants, and waste disposal locations all over the world. So how do Agent Orange affect health? Exposure to Agent Orange has been linked to many serious and life-threatening health conditions. There are four main types of the most well-documented effects. The first one is cancer and chronic diseases. Many studies have linked dioxin exposure to many different cancers. These types of cancers include non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, leukemia, lung cancer, and prostate cancer. Many of the veterans from Vietnam War that was exposed to Agent Orange also have higher rates of diabetes, immune system disorders, and liver disease. The second type of the documented effects from Agent Orange is birth defects and genetic damage. The children of those individuals exposed, both Vietnam civilians and the US veterans, have suffered greatly severe birth defects. These defects include spina bifida, missing limbs, and neurological disorders. These observations suggest that dioxin contamination greatly affects DNA and will pass health risks to the future generations, not just to those who were first exposed many years ago. The third type of the documented effects from Agent Orange is neurological and physiological and psychological disorders. Many of those who survived Vietnam War but was exposed to Agent Orange experienced neuropathy, cognitive decline, and Parkinson's disease. Other psychological effects like PTSD, depression, and anxiety was also common among the affected veterans and civilians. And there wasn't really a lot of research and stuff about the psychological disorders in the early 70s, so they didn't get a lot of help. The fourth type of documented effects from Agent Orange is environmental and food chain contamination. Since dioxin is a fat soluble, it can accumulate in animals. This means that even those who weren't directly exposed, like was in the forest where the Agent Orange was put or made the Agent Orange in the factories and stuff, they could still, and still can to this day, have long-term exposure through food. Many contaminated soil and water sources continue to affect new generation in Vietnam and other of the surrounding areas to this day. These four well-documented effects of Agent Orange makes it a very classic case of hazardous waste mismanagement, and it's a toxic legacy that still remains now decades after its last use. I will now talk about Agent Orange and waste management failures. One of the biggest concerns about Agent Orange is how its toxic waste was mishandled. There are three main ways that the mishandling happened. The first one is improper storage and disposal. After Vietnam War, there was a lot of leftover Agent Orange. These leftovers, which was many millions of gallons, were just buried in the forest or underground, just dumped or even burned. This spread the dioxin contamination even further by ash, wind, the ground, water. The second is cleanup challenges and long-term contamination. The fact is that dioxin does not break down easily. This means that some of the contaminated sites still have the same levels of toxicity over 50 plus years later. Some cleanup efforts has been made, but they are very expensive and often left incomplete. This means that many former storage and spraying sites are still to this day affecting the local communities. The third is occupational and military exposure. Since the Agent Orange had to come from somewhere, this means that the factory workers who produced the Agent Orange also suffered from exposure. A lot of these workers developed cancer and neurological diseases like those earlier mentioned, mostly due to the unsafe handling of the chemical waste. Even to this day, a lot of veterans and their families struggle to receive compensation for their exposure-related injuries. So, what can be learned from this disaster when speaking about waste management and health safety? It is very important to have proper handling and disposal of toxic chemicals, which we must remember to do. Hazardous chemicals require strict disposal methods if you want to prevent environmental and human exposure. Things like open dumping, burying, and burning of the different toxic waste can lead to long-term deadly consequences. Transparency and accountability is also very important. Governments and companies must learn to be transparent about different risks of the different chemical exposures, and they also need to be responsible for cleanup efforts, even if it was expensive or takes a lot of time or anything like that. We can see from the initial cover-up of Agent Orange that the dangers which led to unnecessary suffering and long-term delayed medical assistance. There also need to be long-term monitoring of the contaminated sites. Toxic waste doesn't just disappear from the earth. It needs to be monitored long-term, and regulations need to ensure that it doesn't harm any future generations. Different cleanup programs have shown us that contaminated areas can be rehabilitated, but only with a lot of investments and commitment. So, to summarize, Agent Orange serves as a very tragic example of how dangerous waste mismanagement can ruin human health and environment. Dioxin contamination from Agent Orange still to this day affect people, which prove that the consequences of poor waste handling not only last years, but generations. This piece of history reinforces the huge importance of responsible toxic waste disposal, monitoring the environment, and making ethical decisions regarding public health. Thank you.